I keep asking myself if hiding those 3 apartments was a mistake. Right now, sitting in my living room with my mother-in-law, across from me and a notary public beside her, it feels like everything is about to crumble. My heart pounds against my ribs, and I can barely hear anything over the rush of blood in my ears. I never expected my decision to stay silent would lead to this moment. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to the beginning, to 2 months before my wedding day. Before I dive into what happened next, I would love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you have ever kept a secret that came back to haunt you, hit that like button, and do not forget to subscribe because this story takes some unexpected turns you will not want to miss. So, let me take you back to where it all began 2 months before my wedding day. 2 months before I married Sarah, my grandfather passed away from a sudden heart attack. The man who raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 7 was gone. Standing at his funeral on that gray afternoon rain dripping from the edges of the cemetery tent, I felt more alone than I had since childhood. He was not just my grandfather. He was my father, my mentor, my anchor. About a week after we laid him to rest, I received a phone call from his estate lawyer, a man named Mr. Harrison. The meeting took place in a downtown office that smelled of old books and coffee. Mr. Harrison, a thin man in his 60s with reading glasses perched on his nose, slid a folder across his mahogany desk. Inside were documents I never expected to see. My grandfather had left me 3 apartments. 3. I could hardly process it. The first was a 2-bedroom unit downtown, currently rented for $2,400 a month. The second was a studio near the university, bringing in $1,600 monthly. The third, a 3-bedroom in the suburbs, generated $2,800. The total value of these properties, around $2.7 million. The passive income alone was $6,800 every month. I sat frozen in that leather chair, staring at the papers. My grandfather had been a retired carpenter who lived in a modest house, drove a 15-year-old truck, and wore the same flannel shirts year after year. How did he accumulate this? Mr. Harrison explained that my grandfather had invested wisely over decades, buying properties when they were affordable and holding on to them. He lived simply so he could leave me something substantial. Tears blurred my vision as I signed the initial documents, overwhelmed by grief and gratitude in equal measure. That night I lay awake in my apartment, the city lights filtering through my blinds. Sarah and I had been dating for 18 months. We were planning our wedding for 2 months away. She was wonderful, kind, funny, supportive. She worked in marketing, earned about $52,000 a year, and we had built what I thought was a solid foundation. But as I stared at the ceiling, a troubling thought crept in. Should I tell her about the inheritance I had seen? Friendships dissolve over money? I watched my college roommate break up with his girlfriend after his family sold their business. Suddenly, she wanted a bigger ring, a fancier wedding, a house he could not afford on his salary alone. The relationship had changed overnight. I did not want that to happen to us. I wanted to be certain Sarah loved me for who I was, not what I had. So lying there in the darkness, I made a decision. I would keep the apartments secret, at least for now, just until I was completely sure. Over the following weeks, I met with Mr. Harrison again, signed all the necessary paperwork, and arranged for the rental income to deposit into a separate bank account Sarah did not know about. I kept every document locked in a small safe in my home office. At work, where I earned $75,000 annually, as an engineer, nothing changed. I continued living modestly, saving for our wedding, acting as though my financial situation was exactly what Sarah believed it to be. The weight of the secret felt heavy sometimes, but I told myself it was temporary. Once we were married, and I felt completely secure, I would tell her everything. Our wedding day arrived on a sunny Saturday in June. We held the ceremony in a garden venue outside the city with about 80 guests. I paid $15,000 from my personal savings, while Sarah's family contributed $10,000. It was simple, beautiful, and exactly what we wanted. Sarah looked radiant in her dress, and when she smiled at me during our vows, I felt certain I had made the right choice in marrying her. That day, standing beneath a wooden arch wrapped in white flowers, I truly believed we would build a life based on love and trust. We spent 5 days at a cabin in the mountains for our honeymoon. The place had no cell service, just pine trees, a lake, and endless quiet. We hiked during the day, cooked meals together in the evenings, and talked about our future. Sarah said she wanted 2 children someday and a house with a backyard where we could have barbecues and watch our kids play. I held her hand and imagined that future, feeling grateful and hopeful. Those 5 days felt like the beginning of something permanent and good. When we returned to reality, we moved into our 1-bedroom apartment that cost $1,400 a month. I continued my engineering job, and Sarah returned to her marketing firm. Life felt ordinary and happy. I woke up beside her each morning, we made breakfast together, and we talked about our days over dinner. On weekends, we watched movies and explored the city. The rental income from the 3 apartments quietly accumulated in my separate account, but I did not touch it. I was building a safety net, waiting for the right moment to reveal everything. In those early weeks of marriage, I convinced myself that keeping the secret a little longer was not dishonest, it was just cautious. I wanted our relationship to grow strong roots before introducing something as complicated as significant wealth. 1 week after we returned from our honeymoon, everything changed. It was a Saturday morning, and Sarah and I were sitting at our small kitchen table eating scrambled eggs and toast. The apartment smelled like coffee and sunlight streamed through the window. Then the doorbell rang. Sarah stood up, glancing at me with a puzzled expression. We were not expecting anyone. She walked to the door and opened it, and I heard her gasp softly. Standing in our doorway was her mother, Diane Morrison. Diane was 55 years old with shoulder-length blonde hair that looked freshly dyed and styled. She wore a navy blazer over a white blouse, dress pants, and heels far too formal for a casual Saturday visit. But what made my stomach drop was the man standing beside her. He was middle-aged, wearing a gray suit and carrying a brown leather briefcase. Diane smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Abraham, honey," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk. This is Mr. Brennan, a notary public. I hope you do not mind me bringing him here." I looked at Sarah, hoping for some explanation, but she avoided my gaze. My pulse quickened. Something was very wrong. I stood up from the table, wiping my mouth with a napkin, and forced a polite smile. "Good morning, Diane. This is unexpected. What is this about?" Diane walked into our living room as if she owned it, Mr. Brennan following quietly behind. She sat down on our couch, crossed her legs, and gestured for the notary to sit beside her. He did, placing his briefcase on the coffee table. Sarah hovered near the kitchen, looking uncomfortable. I remained standing, my arms crossed. "I wanted to help you two get started on the right foot," Diane said smoothly. "You are married now, and it is important to get everything on paper. Joint accounts, shared assets, insurance policies, you know the basics of financial planning for married couples." I frowned. "I appreciate your concern, but Sarah and I are handling our finances. We are taking things step by step." Diane waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I know you are both responsible, but sometimes young couples need a little guidance. That is what mothers are for." Her smile sharpened. "Besides, there are certain things that need to be formalized sooner rather than later." Mr. Brennan remained silent, his hands folded on top of his briefcase. I noticed Sarah had not said a single word. She stood frozen near the kitchen counter, staring at the floor. A cold knot formed in my chest. "What exactly are you suggesting needs to be formalized?" I asked carefully. Diane leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "Abraham, I know about your grandfather." Time seemed to slow. My mouth went dry. I forced myself to keep my expression neutral. "What about him? I know he passed away. I am very sorry for your loss." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "I also know he left you something quite substantial." The room felt airless. How could she possibly know? I glanced at Sarah again, and this time I saw guilt written across her face. My heart sank like a stone. "How do you know that?" My voice came out rougher than I intended. Diane smiled. a cold, calculating expression. A mother does her research when her daughter is getting married. It is my job to protect her. She tilted her head slightly. You inherited 3 apartments, Abraham. Very nice ones, I might add. Downtown, near the university, and in the suburbs. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. She knew everything, the exact properties, the locations. This was not a guess. Someone had told her, or she had hired someone to dig into my finances. I turned to Sarah, my voice shaking slightly. You knew about this. Sarah finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. Mom just wanted to help, she whispered. Help. The word felt like acid. I turned back to Diane, who was watching me with the satisfaction of a cat cornering a mouse. Let us be practical, Diane said, her voice taking on a business-like tone. You inherited these apartments before your marriage, yes. But now you are married to my daughter. These assets should be shared. It is only fair. Marriage is a partnership, after all. She nodded to Mr. Brennan, who opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. Mr. Brennan is here to help us draw up the paperwork. We will add Sarah's name to the deeds. It is simple, really. Just a few signatures. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I appreciate your concern, Diane, but this is not the right time to discuss this. Her expression hardened instantly, the fake warmth evaporating. Not the right time. You have been married for a week. When exactly is the right time? I need time to think about this. This is a major decision. Diane stood up abruptly. Are you saying you do not trust my daughter? That is not what I am saying. Then prove it. Sign the papers. Her voice was sharp, now all pretense of friendliness gone. I stood my ground. No, not today. For a moment Diane just stared at me, her jaw tight. Then she grabbed her purse and turned to Mr. Brennan. Pack your things. We are leaving, Mr. Brennan quickly gathered the documents and closed his briefcase. Diane walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at me. Fine, but we will be back. And Sarah deserves what is hers. She glanced at her daughter. Come on, Sarah. But Sarah shook her head slightly. I will stay here, Mom. Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, she left Mr. Brennan trailing behind her. The door slammed shut, and the apartment fell into terrible silence. I turned to Sarah, my hands trembling with anger and hurt. You told your mother about the inheritance. She wrapped her arms around herself. She asked. I could not lie to her. When did you find out? She hesitated, then whispered. I overheard you talking to the lawyer on the phone. About a month before the wedding, the betrayal hit me like a freight train. She had known before we got married. She had known during our vows, during our honeymoon, during every moment I thought we were building something honest together. Why did you not tell me you knew? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Because I was afraid you would think I only married you for the money. Did you? The question came out harsher than I intended, but I needed to know. No, she took a step toward me. I love you, Abraham, but Mom has been going through a really tough time financially. She made some bad investments. She owes money to some people. I thought maybe we could help her. And there it was. This was not about sharing assets between spouses. This was about bailing out her mother. How much does she owe? Sarah looked down. I do not know exactly. Guess. A lot. Her voice was barely audible. I felt sick. Sarah, those apartments, they are my grandfather's legacy. He worked his entire life to leave me something secure. And you want me to just hand them over to fix your mother's mistakes. Not hand them over, she said quickly. Just add my name. We would still own them together. And maybe we could sell one to help Mom out of her debt. Sell one. I laughed bitterly. Do you hear yourself? She is my mother, Abraham. I cannot just abandon her. And I am your husband. My voice cracked. Does not that mean anything? She did not answer. We stood there in the wreckage of our week-old marriage, and I realized I did not know this woman at all. That night we slept on opposite sides of the bed, as far apart as two people could be in such a small space. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my mind racing, my heart breaking, wondering if the woman lying beside me had ever truly loved me at all. The next morning I knew I could not just sit and let this happen. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. After Sarah left for work, barely speaking to me, I called a friend of mine named Marcus who worked in finance. I asked him if he could help me look into Diane's financial situation, anything that was public record. He agreed and called me back 3 hours later. "Abraham," he said, his voice serious, "your mother-in-law is in deep trouble." He had found records showing that Diane owed approximately $180,000. Most of it came from a failed boutique she had tried to open 2 years ago, which had gone under within 8 months. But there were also significant gambling debts from a casino downtown. Marcus said collection agencies were involved, and there were liens against some of her personal property. After hanging up with Marcus, I did something I am not proud of. I checked Sarah's phone. I know it was a violation of privacy, but I needed the truth. What I found made my blood run cold. Text messages between Sarah and Diane going back months long before our wedding. One message from Sarah sent 3 weeks before our ceremony read, "Mom, I confirmed it. 3 properties, downtown University area and suburbs." She had told her mother everything. She had been gathering information and reporting back. I felt nauseous. I immediately called Mr. Harrison, my grandfather's estate lawyer. I explained the situation and asked him directly, "If I inherited these properties before I got married, does Sarah have any legal claim to them?" His answer brought the first bit of relief I had felt in days. "Abraham, since you inherited those apartments before your marriage, they are your separate property under state law. Your wife has no legal claim unless you voluntarily add her to the deeds. And given what you are telling me, I would strongly advise against doing that." I thanked him and hung up. So Diane knew this. That was why she had shown up with a notary so quickly, trying to pressure me into signing while I was still in the honeymoon phase before I had time to think clearly. She was trying to manipulate me into giving away what was legally mine. That evening when Sarah came home, I was waiting. I had printed out everything, the public records of her mother's debt, screenshots of the text messages. I laid them on the kitchen table. "We need to talk," I said. She saw the papers and went pale. We sat down, and I did not waste time. "I know about your mother's debt. All $180,000 of it. I know you texted her about the apartments before our wedding. I know this was planned." Sarah started crying, her hands covering her face. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." "Tell me the truth." All of it. Through tears, she confessed everything. 6 months before we met, Diane had come to her in a panic about her financial situation. She had told Sarah that if she could find someone stable, someone with money, maybe they could save the family from ruin. Then Sarah met me. She swore she fell in love with me genuinely, but when she discovered the inheritance by accident, it felt like fate. She told her mother, and Diane began planning. The idea was simple. Get married, add Sarah's name to the deeds, sell 1 or 2 of the apartments, and use the money to pay off Diane's debts. "We were not going to take everything," Sarah insisted. "Just enough to help Mom." "Just enough," I repeated numbly. "Did you ever really love me? Or was it always about the money?" "Both," she whispered. "I love you, but I also love my mother. Cannot you understand that I understood perfectly? She loved me, but not enough to be honest. She loved me, but not more than she loved the idea of rescuing her mother. And when I refused to play along, the threats started. 'If you do not help us,' Mom says, 'she will sue,' Sarah said. 'She will say you hid assets before marriage.' She knows lawyers. 'She will drag you through court and make your life miserable.' I looked at her, this woman I had married just weeks ago, and felt nothing but emptiness. 'I think you should stay with your mother tonight.' She left without another word, and I sat alone in our apartment surrounded by the ruins of what I thought was love. The next morning, I contacted a divorce attorney named Wilson. I brought every piece of evidence I had collected, the text messages, the financial records of Diane's debt, the timeline showing Sarah knew about the inheritance before our wedding. Attorney Wilson reviewed everything carefully, then looked up at me. "You have a very strong case, Abraham. These properties are yours alone. I recommend we file for divorce immediately to protect your assets." I took a deep breath. "Do it." The plan was straightforward. First, file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and fraudulent intent. Second, present evidence of the conspiracy between Sarah and Diane. Third, request that Sarah vacate our shared apartment. Fourth, change all my passwords and bank account information. I executed each step, methodically operating on autopilot because feeling anything would have destroyed me. When the divorce papers were served to Sarah through her attorney, Diane called me within an hour. She was screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You cannot do this. We will destroy you. I will take you to court and ruin your life." "Try it," I said calmly. "I have evidence of everything. Your debt, your plan, all the text messages between you and Sarah. You have no legal claim to my property, and if you try to pursue this, I will file a countersuit for attempted fraud." The line went silent. Then she hung up. Diane did try to sue. She claimed that I had entered the marriage under false pretenses by hiding assets, but her case fell apart immediately. The apartments were inherited before the engagement, before the marriage, and under state law, they were my separate property. Moreover, the text messages proved that she and Sarah had conspired to manipulate me into signing over property rights. Her attorney withdrew from the case within 2 weeks. The divorce moved quickly. We had been married for such a short time and had no children, no shared property beyond some furniture. Within 6 weeks, it was over. The judge granted the divorce. I kept all 3 apartments, and Sarah received nothing except her personal belongings. Diane was left to deal with her debts on her own. The final time I saw Sarah was when she came to collect her things from the apartment. She looked thin and tired, dark circles under her eyes. She packed her clothes into boxes while I watched from the doorway. "I am sorry, Abraham," she said quietly. "I really did love you." "Maybe you did," I replied, "but not enough to be honest." She started crying, but I did not move to comfort her. "Goodbye, Sarah." She picked up the last box and walked out the door. I closed it behind her, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the wood. A chapter of my life had ended, messy, painful, but finally over. I felt lighter, like I had been carrying something poisonous and had finally set it down. It hurt, but it also felt like freedom. The first month after the divorce was brutal. I moved into the downtown 2-bedroom apartment, the one that had been rented out. The tenant's lease had ended, so it was vacant. I spent my days working and my nights staring at the walls, replaying everything in my mind. I wondered if I had made mistakes, if I should have handled things differently, if my secrecy had somehow caused this disaster. Sleep was difficult. Trust felt impossible. But slowly, things started to change. 3 months after the divorce, I received a promotion at work, a senior engineer position with a significant raise. I threw myself into the job, finding purpose in solving problems and building things. I started going to the gym 5 mornings a week, rebuilding my physical health along with my mental state. I made friends with my neighbors, people who knew nothing about my past and simply liked me for who I was. 6 months after the divorce, I began volunteering at a homeless shelter on weekends. Helping people who had far less than I did gave me perspective. My grandfather's legacy was not just about the money or the properties, it was about having the freedom to choose how I lived and who I helped. I set up a scholarship fund in his name for kids who had lost their parents just like I had. Giving back made the inheritance feel meaningful rather than like a burden or a target on my back. A year after everything fell apart, I found myself sitting on my balcony one evening, watching the city lights flicker on as the sun set. I realized something important. My instinct to protect those apartments had not been wrong. It had been self-preservation, and that instinct had saved me from making a terrible mistake. I had not been paranoid or untrusting. I had been wise. And I refused to feel guilty about that anymore. I also realized I did not hate Sarah or Diane. I pitied them. Greed and desperation had destroyed their relationship with each other and with me. Sarah had sacrificed a real marriage for a scheme that failed. Diane had lost any chance of a relationship with a son-in-law who might have genuinely cared for her. They had both lost far more than money. As for me, I learned lessons I will carry forever. I learned that protecting yourself is not the same as not trusting. Sometimes caution is wisdom, not cynicism. I learned that the right person will love you for who you are, not what you have. I learned that timing matters, but so does honesty, and finding the balance between those two things is delicate and important. Most of all, I learned that some people come into your life to teach you what you do not want, and that lesson is just as valuable as finding what you do want. I am still single now a year later. I date occasionally, but I am in no rush. The 3 apartments continue generating income, and I use that money to live comfortably and help others. I focus on my career, my health, and building a life that feels meaningful. When I meet someone new, I am more careful, but I am also more confident. I know my worth now not in dollars but in character and integrity. Sometimes I still wonder, what if I had told Sarah about the inheritance from the beginning? Would she have chosen differently? Would her mother have stayed out of it? Maybe, but I will never know. And honestly, I am okay with that. Because now I understand what I deserve. I deserve honesty, loyalty, and love that does not come with conditions or hidden agendas. And I am willing to wait for someone who sees that too, with or without the apartments. My grandfather used to say, "The right things come to those who do not settle." He was right about that. He was right about everything. And wherever he is now, I hope he knows that his legacy did not just give me financial security. It gave me the freedom to walk away from something toxic and the strength to build something better. That is the greatest gift he could have given me. So, here is my question for you. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect yourself, even when others called you selfish? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had hidden motives? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear your stories. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have not already subscribed to this channel, for more real-life stories about love, loss, and the lessons we learn along the way. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope wherever you are in your journey, you find the courage to choose what is right for you. Take care, and I will see you in the next story.